All right, so good evening. My name is Jason Reminick, and I'm CEO and founder of Thalamus. I'm a applicant from the 2012 match cycle, now running Thalamus, and welcome you all back to the fourth part of our Gearing Up for Residency with Thalamus webinar series. Tonight's webinar is about proven strategies for managing student debt. We're excited to have our uh, collaborators at Student Loan Professor and Doctors Without Quarters, and I'll introduce Brandon in just a second. But this is the fourth webinar in the series that we put together for the first time this year. For those of you that have joined us for the prior three, welcome back. If you're new tonight, welcome. We're really happy to have you. For those of you that may or may not know about us at Thalamus, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. We were built by GME for GME. I got stuck in New York City during Hurricane Sandy during my own application cycle, which was kind of the catalyst for the creation of all of this. From there, we've been working with many, many specialties leading up to our collaboration with the AAMC as well this past year and going forward. We have many academic physicians, medical researchers, current and former applicants who've worked with us, as well as program directors, coordinators, and other select GME leadership. We're joined by other kind of technology experts and software product economists, AI, ML, etc. We're a very mission-driven organization, really focused on social impact, close gaps of access for all, and increase diversity in medicine. And we do a lot of industry-leading research as well. Our team continues to grow. At the top was last February 2023. The bottom photo was April 2024. So we're excited to continue to expand and have more offerings. One of that, which we've decided to do this year, was the first time we've offered this Gearing Up for Residency series. And so we also have a nonprofit that provides financial assistance in the form of grants and scholarships to medical students who are underrepresented in medicine to navigate the transition to residency. And previously, we did over $40,000 in scholarships just for the costs of applying to residency. We're also obviously going to talk about the costs of medical school tonight and what to do with all of that as well. And so, as I mentioned, this is the fourth of four webinars for the Gear Up for Residency with Thalamus webinar series. We started off with Doc to Doc to talk about 6 ways you're wasting money, followed up with physician loans to talk about physician loans one-on-one and financing your dream home. 2 days ago, we were talking with our friends and colleagues at Practice Link about First Practice, the resident and fellow career guide, to set you up with resources for your next gig after residency. Never too early to start thinking about it. And tonight, we're going to have proven strategies for managing debt, best practices for 2024 medical graduates. And so again, for each webinar series and session that you've attended, you gain entry into a drawing, or one lucky winner will have their residency application fees reimbursed by Thalamus. That's just our big thanks to all of you for joining us in this series. We'll do that drawing early this week and announce that, as well as send a survey out to all of you that have attended the various webinars, because we'd love to hear your feedback and understand how we can make this better and enhance it and grow it and do more in the future as well. So tonight, to wrap up the series, I'm very excited to introduce Brandon Barfield, who's the president and co-founder at Student Loan Professor, formerly and somewhat still Doctors Without Quarters. He can explain that to you. This is another service that I've used personally, was really impressed, have had several colleagues and friends, all of whom are were at the time were medical students, now residents, some of which are now attendings, going through this process, and really got a lot of value speaking with Brandon and his colleagues, myself included. So Brandon, very excited to welcome you tonight. I'll stop sharing my screen so you can share yours, and very much looking forward to the webinar.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jason, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure. As Jason mentioned, it's our first time partnering together in this endeavor, so I'm super excited about it. And I'll get this slideshow up, and we'll get this show on the road. Well, I say that, I have to move all my screens over again. All right. I should be sharing. Are we looking good, Jason?
We see it. Looks great.
All right. So first of all, congratulations. I know it's graduating through medical school. I'm not a doctor. I've not done it. You're talking to a guy who could barely pass high school chemistry. So I never cease to be amazed at what you all do, and not just the amount of information you're able to cram into your head, but apply it as physicians. And so, very sincere congratulations. Residency is a whole different animal, of course, but going to be a lot of fun for you all. And of course, in the middle of that, between graduation and starting training, this is the time to be figuring out your student loan debt. You're going to be making some pretty critical decisions here over the next few weeks and months. And I want to make sure that you have a great understanding of how to make those decisions and what are the best decisions you can make when you're managing six-figure student loan debt. Just a really quick background. I have been traveling the country, speaking at medical schools, doing group exit counseling, one-on-one exit counseling, GME orientation, didactics, you name it. We do a lot of work to put helpful education in the hands of medical graduates and early career physicians, such as the presentation you're going to see tonight. And my colleague and I in 2015 started Doctors Without Quarters as a full service student loan advisory, not just offering education, but also offering one-on-one individual counseling to the greater healthcare community. And since that time, we've counseled well over 10,000 graduates, with most of those being physicians, MDs, NDOs, and a few other graduate health professionals as well. And as Jason mentioned, we've got a kind of a dual branding going on here. We are getting more and more requests to speak to optometrists and dentists and nurses and just lots of people out there that need help with their student debt. And so we rebranded to Student Loan Professor just this past fall, just to be more welcoming. We don't want people thinking they can't get help from us because they're not technically a doctor or have a doctorate level degree. And so nothing's really changed with who we are, what we do. We just wanted a more welcoming brand. So that's what's going on. We're kind of phasing out the Doctors Without Quarters brand there. And our goal is simple. We want you to understand this stuff. For the next hour, you're going to see this is not some commercial sales presentation, anything like that. It's all about ways to save you money and better understand your loan repayment options. And then, yes, if you want some one-on-one assistance, we're happy to help give you that assistance. But I sincerely hope an hour from now, all of you feel much, much more confident and comfortable managing your debt and understanding your options than maybe you do right now, and hopefully a little less stressed about it as well. All right. Now, we've got a lot to go through tonight, and I'm going to go into this with the assumption that most of you had some sort of exit counseling presentation coming from your school. Again, we work with a lot of schools. Some of those sessions a little more comprehensive, some not so comprehensive. And so I want to talk more tonight about strategy, focusing in on the most opportunistic programs to help you save money, what makes the most sense during trainings. Of course, we're going to hit on things like income-driven repayment plans and PSLF. But I really want to focus in on the cost saving strategies tonight. And then if we need to go back in our Q&A period at the end and dig a little deeper into some of the different topics, I'm here all night. I'm happy to stick around as long as you would want me to make sure you get your questions answered. But we're going to spend about the first 30 minutes or so getting into income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness and the strategies to really make those programs pop. Most of you are going to be on an income-driven repayment plan during training, and most of you at least want to position for public service loan forgiveness and make those training years count, because 90% of training programs do count for PSLF, but only if you sign up in the right way. From there, we'll kind of pick up the pace a little bit. We'll talk about refinancing, when and why that might be a good idea for you, some career economics when you look at different job opportunities, consolidation. One of the first steps and decisions you need to make with your student debt is, should you consolidate? And we'll talk about the pros and cons of that. I've got a good legislative update for you. That's arguably one of the most important things we need to cover tonight. What is coming out of DC? In case you haven't noticed, it's a really hot topic in DC. Student loans are not a secondary issue for this administration, but there's also some things that raise eyebrows coming, and there's a little bit of pushback coming to the side. I'll break all that down for you near the end, and some loan servicer tips, and then we'll save our Q&A for the end tonight. But again, I can't stress enough, your questions add a ton of value to these sessions, and I do hope that you'll ask your question. I'll just ask that you hold them till the end, because hopefully I'm going to answer a lot of them as we push in the material. So with all that said, let's get going. Now, when you take a look at loan repayment options as a resident specifically, you're going to find out real quick, your more traditional federal repayment plans don't exactly make a lot of sense for a resident, right? A standard 10-year payment plan, even a 25, 30-year, what they call an extended term payment plan, they're just not affordable on a residency budget. And by the way, those 25 and 30-year plans also don't count toward any sort of things like public service loan forgiveness. All right. And so, for one reason or another, we just don't see residents in these more traditional plans. Now, you may see this temptation down here of residency forbearance. It's kind of like in school deferment. You basically pay nothing on your debt during training. That's basically hitting the easy button with your student loans. And I think we all probably know at this point, when you hit the easy button, there's a price you pay for that, right? Here's the problem with that: you're racking up interest at the highest possible rate, and none of that time in forbearance counts toward loan forgiveness. All right. So I'm going to highly discourage you from putting your loans in forbearance during training, and instead kind of think about that as your emergency fallback in case you have something really major going on financially. And instead, again, we do see most residents are on income-driven repayment plans, and we very much support that. We think these plans provide a lot of practical and economic value for you, both short-term and long-term. So an IDR plan, in a nutshell, it looks at your income as opposed to your debt level to calculate your monthly payment that you have to pay. And the reason for that is to stop borrowers with high debt to income ratios to quote unquote stop drowning in debt. We always hear politicians talk about borrowers are drowning in debt, right? Well, if you're on an income driven repayment plan, in theory, you should have a nice, easy, affordable payment based off your income, regardless of whether you borrowed 150 or 350,000. I know some of you probably borrowed over more than 400,000. We've seen over 700,000. I just got a call yesterday, in fact, from a guy with 700,000 in debt. And so when you're looking at an income-driven repayment plan, you don't have to memorize this formula, but I want you to understand what drives this payment. The biggest thing that drives it is your tax returns, your AGI, that's your adjusted gross income. There's only one place you can find that, and that's on your previous year tax return. Now, some of you don't have a tax return on file. You didn't work last year. You didn't file taxes, and that's okay. But we're going to talk about that at the end in our consolidation discussion, how you can still leverage these programs even if you don't have a tax return. But your taxes play a huge role, especially those of you who are married. We're going to talk about marriage quite a bit in our strategy discussion here in a few minutes. But note that that doesn't tell the whole story. Even from your AGI, they're going to subtract a pretty big chunk of money, and it's a percentage, or really a multiplier of the federal poverty guidelines or poverty level. And you can see that down here. Under the new SAVE plan we're going to talk a lot about tonight, that's $33,000 that gets deducted from your income before they even calculate your payment. So as a resident, that's basically half your income that's not even factored in. And what the reason I point that out, if you go online and play with some of these free calculators, like on the AAMC or the FSA website, if you just punch in, I make 60 grand as a resident, it's not going to show you the impact of the fact that they're looking backwards at your income and the trailing of that. So you have to be careful with some of the online calculators when you're punching in numbers. But there's a huge menu of income-driven repayment plans. And this is why this stuff is really so confusing at the end of the day, just because there's so many options. Now, having lots of options in life is never a good thing, right? It's always good to have options, but sometimes they can be a bit overwhelming. So my job tonight is to hone in on this for you and help you show the programs that focus on the programs that matter. First of all, the new SAVE plan. You've probably heard a lot about this in the headlines. This is the Biden administration. It's one of their two big signature student loan things that they're working on. But notice there's two versions of the SAVE plan. It's basically two completely different programs. There's an undergrad version and a graduate version. Well, if you're on this call, you're a graduate level borrower, right? So let's focus on the one at the bottom, and that's SAVE for graduate level professionals. And again, I'm hoping you already got some sort of intro to this already, but this has a 225% poverty level deduction. Again, $33,000 or more. If your family size is larger, get deducted from your income. What remains, they calculate your payment at 10% of that number, that's your annual payment, and divide it by 12 to give you your monthly payment. Note that this says weighted average. For those of you that do have undergrad debt, they will calculate a 5% payment from the undergrad version of the SAVE plan for that portion of your debt, 10% for your graduate level, medical school, master's, whatever you have, and then they'll give you the weighted average. So some of you will have maybe a 9 or 9.5% payment, but certainly your medical school debt is the majority of your debt. All right. Now, this is what's a big deal right here for medical graduates. And your class is the first one that's going to be able to take full advantage of this. So it's pretty exciting. 100% interest subsidy. What does that mean? you're going to find when you get into training, for most of you, your payment is so low, it's not even enough to cover your monthly interest. So even though your payment isn't based off your interest and your debt level, they are still calculating that number behind the scenes. It wasn't that long ago, or back in Jason's years, he'll remember this. Most residents were racking up tens of thousands of dollars during training because whether they were payment or not, it didn't make a dent in their student loans, and they come out owing 50, 60 grand more than they went in with. That is now a thing of the past. You are going to make your payment. It goes toward interest. Any remaining interest left on your account gets completely wiped out under the new SAVE plan. And that is a completely tax-free benefit, no strings attached. You do not have to pay it back. Even if you don't care anything about long forgiveness or using these programs after training, that alone is going to save you tens of thousands of dollars during training. I cannot emphasize enough what a big impact this new program is going to have on medical residents specifically. So we're really excited about that. All right. And notice that none of these other plans have that benefit. Now, forgiveness, not to be confused with public service loan forgiveness. We'll get into that here in a few minutes. All of these plans have a taxable long-term forgiveness option that simply says, hey, you're in this program for 20 or 25 years. If you still haven't paid off your debt by that time mark, any remaining debt gets completely wiped out. Unfortunately, that is a taxable event. It's like if you're working a second job and you made 50 or 100 grand, you're going to show that and earn income, and you have to pay taxes accordingly. For some of you, that could make sense. If you're going into primary care, you've already $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. The economics, when I model that out, they do make sense. Most physicians we talk to, they're like, you know what? If I'm not getting PSLF, I don't think I want to deal with this stuff for the next 20, 25 years, especially with an uncertain outcome. And so whether the models make it look good or not, most physicians we talk to just practically are not interested in long-term taxable forgiveness. So that's one of many things we're going to discuss tonight, where there's no right or wrong answer. It's really a matter of personal decision. At the same time, I'm the first one to tell you, you have to kind of find that sweet spot between what makes sense mathematically. You don't want to spend any more money than you have to, and also what makes practical sense, right? You need a loan repayment strategy that you're comfortable with, that has a predictable outcome and doesn't cause you undue stress. All right. And that's one of those items that definitely falls into that bucket there. Now, some of these older plans still make sense. For instance, this one has a limit on how high payments can go. That's not a concern during training, but when you get into practice, obviously your payment is much higher off a practitioner income. This one levels you out at a 10-year payment. That could come in handy if you're trying to pursue, say, public service loan forgiveness. And it also has a shorter taxable forgiveness. If you did want to pursue that long-term taxable forgiveness, you probably will find this older plan is a little more favorable than the new SAVE plan, because again, it's going to level out those payments for you. And so that's something you can explore if you want to, or we can help you with it. Let's look at some numbers. I think you find that looking at case studies, running some numbers on this stuff, it just makes it click a little bit easier. So you need to know your benchmarks. All of you, there's two numbers I want you to know. What is your standard 10-year payment amount? And what is your monthly interest accumulation? So this one you should be able to easily find on studentaid.gov when you play around with their calculators. This one, if you can't find it on there, you can just run the simple math. If I've got, in this case, $250,000 at 6.15%, run the quick math on that, and you'll come out to an annual interest cost of $15,375. So divide it by 12, and that gives you a monthly interest cost of $1,281. You need to know that number. Because again, if you're looking at programs like SAVE, when you get into practice, you want to understand, is it really saving me anything, right? If your payment's above that number, it's not really saving you anything at that point. And so when you look at a resident coming out of training, keep in mind your tax returns are going to be lagging your actual income. Even if you're making 60 grand, most of you, and I'm going to show you how, will be able to document no income this first year. So it's very common for first year residents to get a $0 payment. And then your second year, your payment's also probably going to be zero. And this is a first for your class, because your tax returns reflect the fact that you basically didn't start working until July, and you only made about half that annualized income. And again, that's about the same as that poverty level that I talked about earlier. And finally, year 3 and beyond, yes, your tax returns start catching up with you. This is your budget basically as a resident. It'll vary a little bit depending on your exact income, but most residents aren't going to pay anything or very close to nothing, low payment in years 1 and 2, and then payments of around $200 to $300 in years 3 and beyond. That is a very affordable payment on a residency budget. But most importantly, in this case, with 250,000 in debt, and I know some of you have way more, that's at least $55,000 in interest that you should have accumulated on your debt that you didn't. That was all wiped out. You had liquidity, affordability, and training. And in about 90% of the cases, all of those payments, even those $0 payments, are going to count toward public service loan forgiveness. So if I'm in, especially a longer term training program, I definitely want those years to work in my favor and have payments as low as I can during that time. But the verdict is really out. This is how most residents are and have been for about a decade now, are managing their debt these days. And again, this is something we fully encourage. We think between the forgiveness potential and positioning, the interest subsidies, the affordable payment, it's just a great way to go all around. So if you haven't been leaning toward the income driven repayment plan already, I would encourage you to take another look at it. It would be the exception, certainly if you were going a different route. But of course, everyone's in a little bit different boat. Now, let's get right into public service loan forgiveness. And you'll see real quick, these IDR plans and PSLF, they are not two separate discussions. They are very much related. And those income driven repayment plans are basically the vehicle that gets you to public service loan forgiveness. So this was approved by Congress in 2007. That's important because that means it's protected by Congress. It's about the only thing I can think of right now that has bipartisan support and always has. They both seem to love it on both sides of the aisle. And PSLF provides complete and tax-free loan forgiveness. We hear a lot of people say, "Oh no, that program is definitely taxable." They'll swear till they're blue in the face it's taxable. Those 20 and 25-year programs are taxable. Public service loan forgiveness, oftentimes a 10-year strategy or so, is completely tax-free at the state and local level. That's obviously very important from an economic factor. Three key components to this. Number one, it's a direct loan only program. Most of you have all direct loans, direct subsidized, unsubsidized, grad plus. Maybe you do a direct consolidation loan. As long as it has that D word in it, you're good to go. You don't need to restructure your loan portfolio or anything like that to qualify, unless you've got some older loans or Perkins loans, HPSL. There's a few other types of federal loans out there, but most of you are direct loans. You have to be on an income driven repayment plan and make 120 on-time payments to achieve forgiveness. So this is an event that happens on the back end. This isn't like National Health Service Corps where they're giving you chunks of money along the way. It's all or nothing. So your strategy under this program is to use those IDR plans I just showed you. Keep your payment as low as you possibly can using tax and other strategies, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. And then at the end of that roughly 10-year period, everything left is wiped out, again, tax-free. Most residents and physicians look at this as a 10-year forgiveness strategy, practically. You can look at it that way. I do want to emphasize they are technically counting the number of on-time payments in a qualified work setting. So you probably will have some gaps here and there, but practically speaking, yes, that is a 10-year strategy. And finally, let's talk about employment. Certainly where you work is the primary driver for a public service program. The way they define public service is that you must be directly employed by a federal, state, or local government institution, tribal counts as well, or a 501c3 not-for-profit, and your employment must be an average of at least 30 hours per week. Where we see opportunities here is, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, most of your residencies and nearly all of your fellowships qualify for this. And of course, that's not going to get you all the way there, right? But post-training, we see most of the opportunities is within 501c3 healthcare systems. And I'm sure you've noticed, or maybe you haven't, there is a huge consolidation going on in healthcare right now. And these big health systems, they're coming in, they're gobbling up smaller hospitals, they're buying up physician practices, and they're pulling them in to their big physicians group. And usually we do see that as a good way to qualify you for public service loan forgiveness. Now, I do want to point out, we don't have a ton of time to expand upon it, but I do want to hit on this because it's important and it's causing a lot of confusion as well. In the states of California and Texas, state law specifically prohibits hospitals or health systems from hiring physicians. And it was very difficult for physicians and providers in those states to get PSLF. And so their state medical organizations lobbied the administration and said, hey, this is grossly unfair. It's nearly impossible to get PSLF in our states. We need some sort of waiver exception here. The administration looked at it last year and said, you know what? You're right. And they put in a waiver or an exception to the rule that says if your state specifically prohibits hospitals from employing physicians, then you can have your contracted hospital sign off on your PSLF form. Many of you will find yourself in a contract situation where you work for some physician's group, they're cutting your paycheck, and then they contract with a hospital or a system, and that's where you're working day in and day out. Maybe you're a W-2, maybe you're a 1099, but that is a classic contractor relationship. The general rule for PSLF always has been and still mostly is contractors do not qualify for PSLF. However, we're seeing this rule come out. To my knowledge, only in California and Texas qualify that as of right now. But we're also starting to get wind from our clients and hospital partners. They are getting creative. They are finding ways. Well, we partner with this health system and we're going to have this system sign off on your PSLF form. If your employer has gotten creative and they have found a workaround to certify you for this, FSA is not going to push back. As long as you can find someone in your employment or at your employer to certify you for this, you're going to be good to go. But I'm just telling you, generally speaking, the rule is contractors do not qualify for PSLF. So that's not a consideration too much during training, but I just want to give you heads up because you might hear some misinformation when you get into practice or when you get into training from other people that are a few years ahead of you. And I just want to provide some clarity there. It's a very, very hot topic right now, but generally speaking, we do see they are looking for ways to open up PSLF, and that's a good thing. Let me show you why this is such a big deal. Let me go back to that case study we just looked at. I'm coming out of training. I'm, say, an OBGYN with a starting salary of $300,000. I'm working for a nonprofit, and I've got, again, $250,000 in debt. When we do consultations for doctors, this is the kind of stuff we do. This is what you see on the screen, but I'm showing it now. The same calculator I used to build this presentation is the same calculator we use to give very specific individual advice. But when you're coming out of training, you've got that same lag factor, kind of like you had coming out of medical school. It takes 2 years for your new practitioner income to catch up with you on your tax returns. And so it's not until you're 3 that you see your income even start to come up. But remember earlier, I said you need to know what your standard 10-year payment is, that break-even point. Well, if I've got 250,000 in debt and I'm making $300,000 a year, I've still got a little bit of a gap here, right? I've got a few $100 between them, so I could stay on the save plan. I'm not worried about a cap. But if I kick my income up in this case study to say 400,000 a year, or I drop my debt level down a little bit, I would quickly find my payment would be higher than that 10-year. And you don't want that to happen. You want to keep your payment as low as you can. And that's where switching to that older program might make sense. So we'll circle back to that in a moment. But here's the big deal. $134,000 is what I spent on my debt from start to finish over a roughly 10-year period. I had $194,000 wiped out tax-free. If you got $400,000 in debt, $300,000 in debt, your out-of-pocket cost is still exactly the same as what I'm showing here. The more debt that you have, or the more modest your income, or really a combination of both at the end of the day, the more value you're going to find in these programs, both short-term and long-term. All right. So I certainly won't stand here and promise that everyone's going to get public service loan forgiveness. In fact, some of you will walk away from it because you see more lucrative options, on the for-profit side. But take a serious look at this. This is why PSLF is such a big deal. And I'm hearing from for-profit hospitals all the time, hey, how can we counteract with this? Everyone's asking, do we qualify? And we say no, they leave, right? It's a big, big deal with physicians looking for jobs these days. They're wanting to qualify for that. Now, PSLF, income driven repayment, they don't have to be that complex. They're not hard to sign up for. However, there are enough variables there where you can either lose a lot of money or you can gain a lot more savings that I've been showing if you think proactively when you go through this stuff a couple of years ahead, but especially if you're married. When you're married on these income driven repayment plans, your payment strategy becomes so much more complex than someone who is single. Let me explain why. When they look at that AGI, most married couples file jointly. Well, that means your spouse's income is in your AGI, and that drives up your payment accordingly. So many couples, not all, but I'd say most couples that have a working spouse, they often end up doing a married filing separate tax return strategy. And in most states, that allows you to keep your spouse's income out of the equation. And then the case studies of the economics play out as though you were single. All right. Now, the trade off to that is you give up certain tax deductions, and oftentimes you see your tax bill go up year after year. And so you have to consider, well, how much did I spend on the tax side? How much did I save on the student loan side, not just for that year, but also in the big picture if I care about forgiveness, and decide if it's worth it. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. The state you live in, community property states, you can do a quick Google search. There's 9 community property states, a little bit more complex filing in those states. I can expand on that in the Q&A if you'd like me to. But I will point out a couple of important things here. Number one, if you choose to do married separate and you do take a big hit on your taxes, our tax code allows you to go back up to 3 years later, amend your taxes back to married filing joint. You can recapture that money that you lost that year. All right. So you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. The other one is if you're married to someone who also has significant student debt, there's an option where you say, I want to repay my loans with my spouse. You don't file separately, file them jointly as you normally would. They take your household AGI and split the payment amongst you proportionally based off your underlying debt loads. So as a household, you both end up with basically a single payment and you're not penalized for it. All right. So again, it gets pretty complex. I could dive into that for 20 more minutes if we wanted to, but I'm just giving you kind of a taste of that, what to look out for. But you do need to do a little bit more planning and work if you have a working spouse or a double debt load. Now, when you're looking at your income, the fact they're looking at last year's tax returns, most years, sure, that's great. That works in your favor. There's some years that it doesn't. If you ever see an opportunity where you can document a lower income than your taxes, even if it's temporary, you can proactively jump on that. There's a form you can fill out to stop your payment in its tracks and recalculate it based off that income situation. Here's the classic example that you're all going to face. When you transition from residency to your new practicing job, you probably got a week off, a month off. I had a client that took the entire summer off, didn't start her new job till October 1st this past year, right? She left the country and took a sabbatical, and she probably deserved it. And so you're unemployed for the most part during that time. You can bring your payment all the way down to zero for a full 12-month payment cycle. That one move just saved you probably over 10 grand in budget payments and interest subsidies, and that's 12 more payments toward forgiveness that you didn't have before. All right. So imagine if you did something like that 3, 4, 5, 6 times over the course of your career, how much money are you saving, right? This stuff can add up really, really fast when you consider the amount of debt that's on the line. All right. So give your student loans the attention they deserve. As I mentioned earlier, you can switch between programs, maybe start in one, getting another one with a cap if you need to. And again, we can expand on more of this in the Q&A section later tonight. But give your loans some extra attention. Think of them as an investment, right? If you had $300,000-$400,000 in investment, you'd be giving it the attention it deserves, right? Trying to maximize that investment. Have the same mindset with your student loans, and you'll probably be in a good place. Now, that's not the only way to pay back your debt. Certainly, everyone's not going to get loan forgiveness. A very popular strategy post training, not during training, is to refinance. Refinancing is super simple. I've got X amount of debt at 6, 6.5, whatever my interest rate is. There's usually private lenders that can offer you a better rate in the marketplace. Shocker, the private marketplace can operate more efficiently than the federal government, right? And so when we look at the fact that you've got so much debt or interest on the line, if you can drop your interest rate by 1, 2, 3%, that can save you tens of thousands of dollars in out-of-pocket costs at the end of the day. Not to mention the fact that if you refinance, you basically just check the box on your student loans because you know exactly what your payment is, you know exactly what your savings is, and it just becomes part of your budget, probably sandwiched there somewhere between your mortgage and your car payment, right? And a lot of physicians that we've helped do this, they express that not only they're happy to save money, of course, but they're also happy to basically no longer be thinking about their student loans. It's no longer really a financial or mental priority for you. It's just a budget item. Of course, interest rates are high right now. If you check rates, you're not going to see 3.5% on a 10-year. But again, this is not something you're doing in the short term. And these are kind of the typical rates that I've seen over the last decade. Rates go up, rates go down. That's the nature of things. Now, let me emphasize that the reason I mentioned not doing this during training for two reasons. Number one, most importantly, you don't really know if your future job is going to be a nonprofit, qualify for loan forgiveness, or have other benefits or perks, right? If you refinance, that's a one-way street. You're taking out a new loan from a bank, the proceeds pay off your federal debt, you're no longer a federal borrower. You forfeited all federal benefits. While that might make sense a little bit later down the road, it's a little too early right now to be making such a big decision because you honestly just don't know who your first employer is going to be. And so we've always expressly used caution to residents when doing this. But now with the new SAVE plan, all of your interest being subsidized, your effective interest rate during residency is less than 1% anyway, is what you're actually paying on your debt for the next few years. That's better than any lender is ever going to give you. And so practically you're already getting the benefit of a refi. So this is a great strategy. It makes a lot of sense. A lot of physicians do it, just not during training. Okay. So just use caution. Make sure you understand your options and the pros and cons when you do this. When you do decide to do it, let us know. We will help you with this at no cost. We will shop around different lenders, try to find the best bang for your buck. We're not a lender. We work as a broker and an advocate to you to help you find the best deal in the marketplace. And the reason we don't charge a fee, if anyone says they work for free, run, right? They're hiding something. We're not hiding anything. The lenders pay us a finder's fee. We fully disclose that, but that allows us to get paid by them and not have to charge you for our assistance. And so let us know a few years down the road if you want to explore this. We'll be happy to work with you on it. All right. On that note, when you start thinking long term, short term, you're not going to have all the answers right now. You haven't even started training yet. Don't put a bunch of pressure on yourself thinking, I've got to get all this figured out right now. How am I going to pay back this debt? Am I going to get it forgiven or whatever? It's just too early on, right? You're about to get into stage one of debt management. Stage one means I'm mainly focused on my career, not trying to get rid of my debt. If I can get some interest savings, that's great. If I can position for forgiveness and start counting that just in case, that's fantastic. But really, all you're really doing is kind of treading water with your debt during the next few years. Now, that's going to change, right? When you get into practice, your income goes way up. You start looking at your long-term career. Then your mindset changes to stage two. That's your debt retirement stage. How am I going to get rid of this thing, right? Am I going to get it forgiven? Am I going to pay it down, refinance it? Is my employer going to help me pay down some of it? Don't expect them to pay down all of it, but a lot of employers do have different loan repayment incentives now. And so keep in mind that stage one, stage two, usually you're going to make that transition as you get into your first job. Maybe it could be later, maybe it could be a little bit sooner, but generally speaking, you're not making super long-term debt retirement decisions here during training. But let me give you one quick example. When you do start looking at job offers, I hear so many different things, a lot of preset notions from physicians. Oh, I definitely want PSLF. I'm not even going to look at the for-profit marketplace. I'm bound and determined to find a nonprofit job. That might not be a good move. There are some lucrative jobs out there that might be worth more than loan forgiveness. But then I hear the opposite. I hear people say, oh, I'm going to make way more in the private sector. Forget PSLF. Again, not always the case. At the end of the day, this is not complicated. This is a math problem. PSLF, if you see a job that offers it, it's worth something, right? You just need to know how to do the math so you can compare apples to apples. Let me show you how we do that for our clients. Let's say I got that $250,000 in debt, again, that $300,000 salary. If I were to compare a PSLF strategy through a nonprofit job and whatever my repayment strategy is going to be through a for-profit job, in this case, I'm just using a 10-year payment strategy, what's the difference in out-of-pocket cost? In this case, it's right at $200,000, $201,000. That's just straightforward math. Keep in mind, PSLF is tax-free. That extra paycheck, it's not tax-free, right? We wish it was, but it's not. So you have to put PSLF on a pre-tax equivalent if you really want to compare apples to apples. So now the true value of that PSLF is $251,000. I've got 4 years under my belt from training, roughly. That means I got 6 years to go till I would achieve PSLF. If I divide that out over 6 years, the PSLF in this case study makes that 300,000 job actually more like a 342,000 job when you look at it on a taxable equivalent. And then I can compare apples to apples. Maybe that makes the difference, maybe it doesn't. But again, I just want to make sure I'm making a financially, economically calculated or informed decision here instead of just having some preset notion, right? So I'm not telling you pursue PSLF. I'm not telling you don't pursue it. I'm just saying understand the economics. Money that you're not spending out of your checking account to pay down debt is just as good, if not better, as money coming into your checking account from paying a higher salary or making a higher salary. All right. So I hope you find that insightful. And again, let us know if you need help with that. We can run that in real time. Now, I want to talk about some practical matters here as you start to look at what to do with your loans the next few weeks and the next few months as you start training. Most of you are in grace period at this time. Consolidation. Do not confuse consolidation with refinancing. Technically, you could say a refi is a form of consolidation, but just to keep terminology clear, refinancing is private. You give up your federal benefits. Consolidation is federal direct consolidation. It is direct. Again, you heard the D word, and that means you don't give up anything. It's just taking your federal loans and combining them into one. Most of you don't need to consolidate. Again, you've got all direct loans. They qualify for everything we talked about tonight, but you might want to consolidate for a couple of different reasons. Number one is simplicity. If you've got 8, 10, 12, maybe more different loans, trying to manage that over the next 10 to 20 years, I can almost guarantee you either you or your servicer, or probably both at the end of the day, someone is going to mess something up somewhere, especially as you get into residency. And Jason can speak this better than I can. Residency is insane. 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Your lunch breaks are taken up by noon didactics. I had a resident, a pediatrician one time. Jason, this true story is in August. We had to reschedule her consultation 3 different times. We finally got her on the phone. She said, Brandon, I'm so stressed out. I'm working 100 hours a week. I'm only allowed to document 70. My lunch breaks, noon didactics. I've got no time to breathe. Why does that relate to this? If your life is that busy, you need to do everything you can to make it easy to handle your business. Have your LastPass password manager, have your student loans consolidated, have all your bills on auto draft. Anything you can do to make your life automated or easier to track is probably going to pay dividends over the next few years. Having one student loan to manage instead of 12 or whatever your number is probably going to come around to benefit you in the long run. All right. So just the simplicity. And again, we see this happen all the time. Now, are there any downsides to consolidation? Potentially a couple. There's some new rules about interest capitalization. Your unsubsidized loans don't capitalize when you first come out of school like they used to, but your grad plus loans still will. Capitalization, if you're not familiar with that, that's where they take your interest you're carrying right now, they add it to your principal balance, your loan goes up, and now you're paying interest on a higher rate. Technically, capitalization is always a bad thing. It's never a good thing. Doesn't matter. If all your interest is getting subsidized at the new SAVE plan, if you get PSLF, it all gets wiped out. If you don't pursue nonprofit, you're going to refinance it most likely. It's going to capitalize at that time. When I'm talking to medical doctors specifically, I don't really think there is any downside to consolidation other than the fact they take your weighted average interest from all of your loans, and at some long decimal point number, usually they're going to round that number up to the nearest 1/8 of a percent. So a 6.07 might have gone up to a 6.08 or something like that. All right. But some minimal rounding there. But here's the other reason we like consolidation is how it can impact your strategy. Even this is a big strategic decision. In fact, it's one of the first strategic decisions you need to make. And that concerns the impact of your grace period. Most of you have just entered a 6-month grace period. On your subsidized and unsubsidized loans, it is mandatory. You cannot go into repayment on those loans. On your grad plus loans, it is an automatic post-enrollment deferment, basically the same thing. It's 6 months. It's not mandatory, but it is automatic. Most of you will not start payment until December 1st, even January 1st. There's nothing wrong with that. It gives you time to handle your business before payments come due, but there's nothing strategic about it either. And you're accumulating interest during that time. Grace period is not a free interest period. If you choose to, as soon as your loans come out of in-school deferment, which many of you they have already or they're about to, if you want to, you have the option to pull the trigger on a consolidation. It just so happens that a consolidation does not have a grace period. It's just not a feature of that kind of loan. So we learned years ago we can use grace period as a tool or a trigger to get doctors into repayment several months faster so they can start getting that PSLF clock. And now you can start getting that save interest benefit. That alone is probably going to save you over $1,000 a month. So now more than ever, we think it makes a lot more sense to consolidate before you start training and get those benefits, and then have all your student loan paperwork basically done before you even start day one of orientation. And then you're just focused orientation on residency for the next year or so. All right. You don't have to do that again. One of those things, no right or wrong, but we do see a lot of physicians do that just from the financial and potential, forgiveness benefit at the end of the day. But again, you cannot officially get PSLF or save credit unless you consolidate to get rid of the grace period. And you cannot do that until you make sure your school has taken your loans out of in-school deferment. All right. So make sure you check on that before you do it. And again, I can expand on this more in the Q&A if we need to. Now, legislative update. I've been doing this again since 2011. I have never seen anything remotely close to the pace of change that I have seen the last 3 years under the Biden administration. Now, COVID is, partially responsible for that as well, the payment pauses that kept getting extended. But this administration, student loans used to be a secondary topic for politicians. That is a thing of the past. Student loans are a top priority, first level, whatever you want to call it, priority for this administration. Now, I'm not trying to give you my political beliefs or bias or anything like that. I just want you to be informed and have a clear picture of what's going on in DC and where the different sides stand on this issue. The Biden administration and really the Democrats as a whole, he's got pretty good buy-in from his party. They've been very active, right? And by the way, this is outdated. Over $150 billion has been forgiven on the Biden administration. He's been kind of tweaking different programs. That hasn't really benefited you as students, but it has benefited many of those who have come before you. Of course, the Supreme Court shot down his signature legislation last year where he wanted to wipe out 10 to 20,000 for all borrowers making less than 125,000. That would have impacted your class actually, even as students. And the Supreme Court shot that down. They said a few different things in their decision, but the main thing they said was, hey, you're overreaching. This is a job for Congress, not a job for the White House, right? This is mass loan forgiveness, and that's a big deal. President came out, as you can imagine, right? He said, I disagree. We're going to try again through a different piece of legislation called the Higher Education Act, but that's not what they did. They didn't come out again with another mass loan forgiveness, and this isn't finalized yet, but most of the details are out. They came out with targeted relief for 5 different groups of borrowers. And I think the goal here is to say, for the general public to say, you know what? Yeah, that person kind of got the short end of the stick, or they paid their dues. They deserve to have a portion of their debt wiped out. People that are living below the poverty guidelines, or they're schooling out of business and left them hanging, or maybe they've been in public service for 10 years, or they've been in loan repayment for 25 years, and they just didn't know to sign up for this program or that program. And so it makes a lot of sense. However, this last one here is catching a lot of attention, both good and bad. That says borrowers with hardships. And it basically says the Secretary of Education can look at your account. He can consider 17 different economic factors and say, you know what? You've got a hardship. You deserve loan forgiveness. And so a lot of people, will call it the anti-forgiveness crowd, look at that and they say, you know what? This isn't targeted forgiveness. This is mass loan forgiveness, but it's just kind of packaged secretly. And the secretary is going to run amok and do his thing if this passes. As soon as this gets finalized, there will be a lawsuit led by the GOP to block it. Okay, I've been around long enough. I can tell you that with pretty good confidence. And that's going to be right alongside the other 2 GOP-led lawsuits trying to block the SAVE plan. Now, why do they not like the SAVE plan? They don't care about your 10% payment and your potential 25-year taxable forgiveness. What they're upset about is the undergrad version of the SAVE plan, the one we skipped over on that chart early on in the presentation. Undergraduates only have to make a 5% payment, and those who borrowed rather small debt amounts can get loan forgiveness as little as 10 years. And a few think tanks ran some data on this, and they're claiming only about $6 out of every 10 is actually going to be repaid under the SAVE plan, and the rest is going to be forgiven in some way, shape, or form. And they're basically saying it's a grant instead of a loan repayment program at all. And so they filed a lawsuit. There's 2 of them. They basically say the same thing. And I don't know how they're going to go, but this is a big deal. Both sides are very much dug in. And basically, the Democrats believe that people need to go to college and college is too expensive, and borrowers are essentially forced into this debt, and borrowers need loan relief. And the Republicans say, you know what? You choose to go to college, you choose to take out the debt. Why should somebody who didn't go to college have to pay back your debt? Right. And I'm not validating either of those arguments. I'm simply saying those are the arguments, and both sides are very dug in, and it's a very uncertain time. So while it's great to see an administration is proposing so many great pieces of legislation to provide loan relief and loan forgiveness, we just don't know where it ends and which direction it goes. Certainly, the Trump White House could have a big impact on this as well, if he were to get elected. And so the only loser in this potentially is borrowers, just because of from a planning purpose. It's really hard to do long-term planning right now because the situation is so volatile. And so take that for what it is. My big takeaway from that is you need to stay plugged in until the day your loans are either paid off or forgiven or refinanced. You need to stay plugged in on what's going on in DC. It will impact you in some way, shape, or form, good or bad. Mark my words, there is change coming. It will impact you long after you graduate. So I've got a newsletter you can sign up for, or you can tap into other outlets if you want to, but please stay plugged in. And final thing I've got for you tonight before we wrap up, just a couple of tips. There's a lot of changes going on right now with servicers. So you've got studentaid.gov. That's the government's website. That's where you go to do basically all your applications, exit counseling, consolidation, loan repayment, signing up for your payment plan, certifying public service loan forgiveness. All that stuff is done through studentaid.gov. But you've also got your servicer website, where you go to look at your loans. Is each loan in the right repayment plan? Am I getting my correct interest savings? Things of that nature. When is my payment due? My payment amount? Setting up automatic payments from your checking account, which I recommend. You'll save 0.25% interest. Not that it matters in the save plan, but you will save interest there. There is a big change right now. If you log into your servicer website, you should see some sort of announcement telling you that they have a new login and prompting you to go set up a new login. And what it's basically, I don't remember off the top of my head, it's like mohila/studentaid.gov. They are moving those logins over to the studentaid.gov website so that all borrowers kind of have a unilateral experience. And they're slowly trying to push the servicers to the back burner here, because you've seen the headlines. The services are the root of most borrower problems. I can honestly support that. I can honestly say that most of the problems we have seen on borrower accounts over the years are either the servicer messed something up behind the scenes, or the borrower called in talking to customer service, sometimes asking questions they shouldn't have been asking, but getting bad advice, whether it was just lackluster advice, or the person was ill-trained or ill-informed, or sometimes it just sounds like they don't really care. It's kind of like playing Russian roulette every time you pick up the phone. I tell borrowers, if you get information that doesn't sound quite right, either ask for a supervisor or hang up the phone and call back again. You're guaranteed to get another person to answer the phone, and you might get a different answer. Okay, so just be real careful where you get your student loan advice. Financial advisors, some have taken the time to learn this, some have not. It's not something they teach in finance school. I know I've been through the CFP courses. I've got the finance degree. They don't teach this stuff in finance school. Some advisories have taken the time to learn it, some have not. So just be careful where you're getting your student loan advice, and don't call your servicer asking for strategic advice. They don't understand what it means to be a doctor or going through training or anything like that. They're there to give you just basic factual information, or maybe technical programmer account information. All right. So with that, I'm going to wind down. I want to give you just a quick glimpse of how you can connect with us if you choose to. If you want to go ahead and be loading up questions in the question and answer field, go ahead and start doing that at this time, and we'll take those questions, or we can unmute the microphones as well. But give me just a couple of minutes to let you know how you can engage us if you want to. First of all, I want to say there's no pressure to work with us. I appreciate Thalamus and Jason give us an opportunity to co-host and partner and provide the session for you. Again, I hope you found the last hour to be strictly informational and helpful. That was my goal. At the same time, we believe in transparency. We don't do bait and switch, cold calls, free calls, none of that stuff. We simply charge for our time. If you would like to connect with an advisor via a Zoom video call, and upload your loans and talk about your specific career path, economic circumstances, personal financial goals. We do that via our student loan consultations. They last about an hour. You can clearly see the price on the screen. And what we do is we spend some time getting to know you. You upload your documents in ahead of time. We've got all your stuff preloaded when you get on the call. The best way to sum this up, all these case studies that I've shown you tonight, we run those same sort of numbers based off your exact data, where you're heading in your career, or what if I get this job, or what if I get a bonus, what if I decide to do fellowship. We can tweak the numbers in real time. You see them on the screen year by year, even month by month if you need it, to show you the impact and where the savings opportunities are. And then we're going to walk you through not just the considerations and the steps to execute. We will have you share your screen, log into studentaid.gov, and we will walk you through these initial applications step by step in real time, so that when you hang up that call, you're basically done for the next year, and you can again focus on your training, and we give you a nice formatted written summary with all the assumptions and the forgiveness and the step by step. Scan the QR code if you want more information on that. It's a quick contact form. All that's going to do is send some emails. It's not obligating anything. That same QR code will also get you on our monthly student loan newsletter. That's not about us. It's not a company newsletter. It's about things going on in the marketplace that you need to know. Most of what's written in there, I write those personally. It's mostly written from the physician's perspective. All right. So if you want to stay informed, that's one good way to stay informed. Just scan the QR code and fill out the quick contact form. Oh, I forgot, Jason. We put up a discount code for you guys. So if you want to save, what is that, like 85 bucks, I think, maybe more, but you can save off your first consultation. Write down that coupon code. It's just Thalamus15, and that will save you 15% off that initial consultation. Okay. And so, but I also want to mention, if you want ongoing assistance, many of our borrowers work with us on an ongoing basis. If they're pursuing forgiveness or doing income driven repayment, or some of them just kind of think of us as insurance, just in case something goes wrong, you're simply prepaying for an annual meeting, but you're also getting unlimited access to your advisor just in case you need us. We will get on a three-way call to your servicer and do the talking as your advocate to make sure they're not giving you bad advice. So there's no pressure to do any of this. You can think about that later. Everyone starts with a consult, and then you can decide later if you care to keep working with us on an ongoing basis, and then refinancing at the end of the day. All right. That's always been free. And for as far as I know, it always will be free. So maybe look that up on our website a few years down the road. And with that, that's all I've got. So we've got a few questions that are coming in. Jason,
Yeah.
dive right into questions, or do you have any thoughts as we start to wind down?
Yeah, no, as more questions come in, I just kind of wanted to jump in and kind of back up a lot of what you were saying, because as has been consistent with a lot of the speakers in this webinar series, these were all services that either I or others on my team have used, or colleagues that we know have used. It was a very curated list, and I can say that a lot of what Brandon discussed tonight, I've been through. I've seen the Russian roulette of calling your servicer and getting very different answers from very different people, hanging up, getting a supervisor, and then something that was previously impossible could get done. In terms of consolidation, like, yeah, you're all going to be very busy intern year, in residency, etc. You get all these different pieces of paper, all these different emails from all these different servicers. If you just have to deal with one, that can be very beneficial to just streamlining your workflow, consistent with some of the other talks we've had as well. I can also say, having now been in this game of repaying student loans for over a decade, the servicers change, the loans get bought and sold. Like, you get a new piece of paper from someone else. You're trying to keep track of all these various different passwords. The more you can do to simplify it, obviously with what meets your own personal situation. Like, I met with Brandon and his team. uh they were able to help me, and I don't practice clinically anymore. I'm a startup founder now, and so I still have student loans, still needed to figure that out, but they, even kind of my edge case, they were able to provide me really good advice on, and it was super beneficial, and really enjoyed the service. And so yeah, we just want to give you guys the best resources possible, and so I think that's what I really wanted to say here. We can jump into the Q&A now. Brandon, you want me to feed these to you, or you want to take them, or how do you want to do this?
I've got them here on the screen, so I can just go ahead and take
Sure.
them.
Cool.
directly. And after we knock some of these out, if anyone wants to unmute and ask your question, you're welcome to, but the Q&A field works pretty well. I'll grab one over on the chat field real quick, then move to Q&A. When can you pick and enroll a repayment plan after finishing exit interview or once you start the repayments? Great question. That exit interview does look an awful lot like an official repayment application. It's actually not. Once your loans come out of in-school deferment, that's when you should see the window open up on studentaid.gov to fill out a repayment application. You'll see it there under the debt management tab, or actually it's a loan repayment tab they've got on there now. If you don't do anything, your servicer will eventually contact you probably about 90 days before the end of your grace period. You'll start getting notifications from them to complete your loan repayment application. All right. And if you do submit something and maybe you change your mind after this webinar, if you fill out another application later, they're just going to kick out the prior one. That's how they always do. They'll just go off whatever the latest information is. All right. Now on the Q&A side, our chat box here, based on the litigation against SAVE, would it strike down both the undergrad and graduate versions of SAVE if it were to succeed? That's a great question. I haven't had that one yet, but the answer is yes, I believe it would, because the whole plan is one package, one new set of rules that they put in, and they're trying to strike the entire thing down. So even the less, let's say, complex or I can't think of the word I'm trying to use, but the less hot button parts of SAVE, they're trying to push it all down. If I had to speculate, I don't like to speculate, but if they were to successfully get rid of SAVE, they'd probably have to reinstitute the repay plan and maybe even the pay as you earn plan, which they took away this year. Repay went away last summer. Pay as you earn, which is the same as IBR for new borrowers, basically. They're getting rid of that June 30th, but those plans didn't have nearly as good interest subsidies. Can a person make more than one qualifying payment? I'm glad you asked that. As soon as I skipped out of that slide, I remembered I didn't put that little bit in there. PSLF cannot be any less than 10 years. Even if you double up payments, they won't give you credit for more than one payment a month, but it can be more than 10 years if you miss some payments, have some gaps in your career. So great question. I'm glad you reminded me of that. If you are involved in the SAVE plan during training for 4 years, then decide to work in a for-profit hospital, will that PSLF benefit of loan forgiveness after 120 payments be lost or accumulate after continuing to work in nonprofit setting? The latter. It's very common to see someone get 36, 48, maybe more qualifying payments in training. Their first job out the gate is for profit. Now, more often than not, if someone gets a for profit job after training, a lot of times they're abandoning PSLF at that point and they figure they're heading down a for profit career path, but not always. And this is where that refinancing discussion comes back in. We talked to some borrowers that are like, you know what, I kind of took this job out of necessity. It wasn't my dream job. I've still got my eyes open on something else. Okay, maybe you shouldn't be pulling the trigger on a refi just yet, because to answer your question, yes, you would pick right back up where you left off if you were to take up another nonprofit job. So if you came out of training with 48 payments, you're going to pick up with payment number 49. The big thing to keep an eye on there is eventually you do hit a point financially where it doesn't make sense to go back, because you're making payments. If that's a 4-year contract, for instance, you're making payments during that 4-year time. When you run the math, and the math is important, you may find out that you're actually going to end up paying down all or most of your debt before you hit that forgiveness mark. And economically, it didn't make sense to go back. So consider that piece of it as well. But yeah, great question. And there was another question here. If I decide to go, okay, I read both of those. Oh no, here it is. If I decide to go for-profit route after doing SAVE plan and residency, will we be responsible for the rest of the remaining loan amount? Yes, you will. So what's going to happen is basically your debt level is going to be flat during training. Every single month, they're going to calculate your interest. You're going to pay 0 or a couple hundred, whatever it is. That will go toward interest. The rest of the interest gets every single month. It gets subsidized, and then your principal is just sitting there. So if you're coming out of school right now with say 300,000, 250, there's a very, very good chance you're going to come out of training on the other end with that exact same amount. And then, depending on where your career takes you and your strategy from there, you can take it from there. Yeah. But again, that's way better than, again, those who came before you, what their options were. All right. Can you talk about consolidating loans if you haven't filed taxes for the last 2 years? Great question. I think that's really more considering when your repayment application, when you're documenting your income. So the first thing it does, it says, did you file taxes? If you say yes, it's going to link to the IRS and it's going to pull in that tax data. If you say no, the next question is simply, do you have an income? And so if you say no, I don't have an income, that's going to give you a $0 payment. That's why it's so great to get a jump on this stuff before training. For the next few weeks, you can all, unless you're married, you can all honestly say, I don't have an income, right? If you wait till, say, July or August or September to fill out that application, then you can't honestly say, I don't have an income, right? And so then they say, well, what is your income? And then they're going to base your payment off of 60 grand. So that's why it's good to get a jump on this stuff. All right. So you recommend consolidating and then start the payments now instead of the end of the grace period. More often than not, yes. I hate to use the word always, but generally speaking, we are big fans of residents consolidating during this period between graduation and the start of training and kind of getting a jump on their strategy if you care about things like interest. Well, that's the thing. Even if you don't care about PSLF, the save alone is such a game changer financially just this first year that it makes sense for nearly all residents to take advantage of that. If we meet with you or your team, will you be able to consolidate during the meeting and sign up for the save plan? Yes. When I mention we do the paperwork, that's mainly what I'm talking about. We're going to log into studentaid. Well, you're going to log into studentaid.gov. You'll be sharing your screen with us, and we're going to walk you through the consolidation. The consolidation is a two-in-one application. First part is the consolidation, the loans, the timeline. You're picking a few different options, and then it goes right into a repayment application. You're picking the payment plan that you want that new consolidation loan to go in. And if you select an income driven plan like Save, it's going to take you through all those income documentation questions. And so, yeah, that's exactly what we do. If I was claimed as a dependent on my parents' taxes the last couple of years, will this affect my SAVE plan? Excellent question. Many of your parents did claim you as a dependent, and that's okay. A lot of students think I can't do anything with taxes because they claim me. No, you can still get a tax return on file. You just have to make sure you check the dependent box. That way it doesn't mess up their filing status. However, if you're doing this just for the benefit of a $0 payment, I think you kind of missed the boat on that from a timeline standpoint because it takes several weeks for that stuff to process. I would recommend to you at this point, just go with the zero income strategy. Just check the box, say, I didn't file taxes, I have no income. That's going to give you a much better timeline than trying to file taxes here the next few days and waiting for them to upload on the IRS database or sending in paper. That takes forever, and half the time they lose that stuff anyway. So just go with the I don't have an income strategy on that. And just a couple of more here. Consolidating my loans, even with some low COVID interest rates, is still beneficial, correct? You catch my attention on that because the interest rates the last few years, I mean, yes, they were fairly low during COVID. But when you look at it overall, like you're probably carrying around 6.5, something like that. The reason, I had it on here and I took it down. One of the potential downfalls to consolidated is you lose the ability to target your interest rates and loan repayments. So back in the day, targeted repayment, if you were to ask, say, Dave Ramsey, how should I pay back my debt normally? Dave's going to tell you stack up your loans from the highest interest rate down to the lowest, pay off those highest ones as quick as you can and work your way down the ladder. That will save you money. Dave's not wrong. Here's the difference. Typically speaking, over the last decade in the refinancing marketplace, we have found that when borrowers went to refinance, they could get all of their loans to a lower interest rate than they were currently carrying on any of their debt. And therefore, there was no need to target anymore. So if you've got interest rates at 5.5, 6.5, and we can get it all down to say 4, right? It didn't matter. And so, yes, generally speaking, even with the lower COVID rates, I think it still makes sense. And questions keep coming in. This is good. If you start on Save but end up having very high income later, so that Save doesn't make sense, what plan is the best to be on? Are there restrictions to switching plans? Great. The new Save plan does have a limit. You can be on it for 60 payments, 60, 5 years before they want to stick you on that plan. And the reason is people used to, like vets in theory, were jumping from the old repay plan in year 19 over to the pay plan to get the shorter 20-year taxable forgiveness. And they tried to close that loophole a little bit, but they didn't close it fully. So they give you 5 years, and which is should be enough to get you through training. So yes, you could go again, they're getting rid of pay, but IBR for new borrowers has a 10% payment, has a cap, a 10-year payment cap, but it does not have any interest subsidy benefits, which isn't going to really impact you in your practitioner income anyway. There is a limit on IBR for new borrowers. If you had any debt before July of 2014, they won't let you get on that program, but there's also an older version of IBR you can get on 15% payment, but it might still get the job done. It's a great question. If I filed taxes last year and the previous years, how will this affect the SAVE program payments that I will have to make? Your payments will be based off your tax return. So if you made no money the last few years, you should get a $0 payment. If you made 100 grand, you're going to get about an $800 payment. Or if you filed jointly with your spouse, that AGI will drive your payment this year. Let me speak to that real quick. If you are married and you already filed married filing joint taxes for tax year 2023 this spring, that AGI is going to drive your payment this year. Now, for some of you, that's a deal breaker, right? That payment's too high. If that payment is too high, then you can either A, go back and amend those taxes if you think it makes sense. Again, that's not a general recommendation. Or B, maybe instead of jumping the gun, you slow play this. Write out your grace period. Even use residency forbearance through maybe February or March of 2025 until you have time to get a married filing separate tax return on file next year, and then jump into your payment strategy at that point. We've seen couples do that before if they've already got their tax returns on file before they understood these strategies. In some cases, just eat this. If it's a slightly higher payment this year, just eat the payment. All right. And it can potentially go down next year. And I think the last one, except there's a couple more on the chat, they might have moved. Jake, will you look at those, see if the ones in chat also got moved to the Q&A? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're
Um,
figuring it out now, but I think they're new, but I'll let you know in a sec.
Okay, so one more here. I never remembered formally consolidating my federal loans, grad or undergrad, yet if I checked on my loans on student.gov, it listed by loans as consolidated. Thus, do I still need to make a consultation with you? Well, I don't know if you necessarily you don't need to make an appointment with us just for consolidation. You might want to make an appointment with us to look into that and find out what's going on, or maybe just look at your overall strategy. But yeah, I'm not sure I've ever talked to anyone who consolidated their loans by accident. So yeah, your question does kind of pique my interest there. I'm curious what's going on as well. That's not something that ever happens automatically. Like someone did something or it's not showing. Yeah, I'm not sure. You got my interest there. I missed the information you said earlier on where you can select your payment plan. Will you please repeat that? So you go on studentaid.gov, and I think it's the loaner payment tab. It used to be the manage my loan tab, but I think they've changed it to just loaner payment, if I'm not mistaken. But you click on that and you should see the selection for consolidation is the first thing you see. And then under consolidation, you see either one or multiple options to select a repayment or change a repayment. And you click on that and it guides you straight through. It's a relatively long application, but it's not too overly complex if you know what you're doing there. If you switch from SAVE to say a standard 10-year repayment after 4 years of residency, does that 10-year period start at the point where you change plans or at the point where you first enter repayment? That's a great question. That rule has changed over the years. For instance, it depends whether or not you consolidated. If you did not consolidate and you have all direct loans, our understanding, and we don't see this very often, but our understanding, they would put you on a 10-year term starting at that point. Under the old loan, used to be a prorated. If you're 4 years in, they'd give you a 6-year payment. But we don't really, even if the rules still technically say to do that, which we actually think they do, practically, we don't see the servicers implementing that anymore. It's kind of a hot topic. What is my 10-year payment plan 5 years from now? You're asking that question. The only way to find that out is to call your servicer and have them verify what's showing on their screen, even if you know what it was at the time, because you really don't know what they're showing in their system. It's a very hot topic. But the reason I say it depends, if you consolidate the standard payment, if you consolidate more than $60,000, which most of you would, your standard payment is actually a 30-year term. But a 30-year term doesn't qualify for PSLF. We actually just put out an article on this. You can go, it's at the top of our blog right now. If you were looking to cap out on a 10-year strategy later down the road and you didn't say qualify for IBR for new borrowers, you would need to call up your servicer and say, hey, I need to know my 10-year payment equivalent, and I want you to put me on that exact payment amount and have that amount show on my bill specifically for PSLF. And these are a couple of my guys came from Mohila, so they've done this stuff before on the Mohila side, on the servicer side. And yeah, it can get a little bit hairy there. But again, this isn't something you're going to have to deal with for a very long time. For filing temporary expanded, oh, you're checking my knowledge now. It's been a while on that one. Will that be done via studentaid.gov in the future instead of Mohila? Yes, it will. And again, studentaid.gov is going to be the new website for everything. But for the foreseeable future, the servicers are still handling the customer service. So it's kind of weird how they're integrating everything online. But mark my word, when you pick up the phone, you are talking to your servicer. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. But there's no plans that I've seen for the Department of Education to bring the call centers into house under their direct purview. If my loans still say in school despite graduating a month ago, is this something that the servicer can fix? The servicer cannot fix it. Usually, the latest I've seen schools schedule a flip is May 30th, May 31st, whatever the last day of May is. Usually, if your loans haven't flipped by that point, unless you graduated, like LECOM graduates in first week of June, some of their classes. But if you've been graduated for over a month, that is a potential red flag. I would call your registrar's office or talk to the school and find out if the rest of your class, or talk to your peers, find out if their loans. It seems like every year we see a couple of schools, for whatever reason, they send off the whole class, digital file goes to this big student loan clearinghouse, and then they send all the data to the individual servicers, and it just seems to get lost in cyberspace, and sometimes it can be tough to fix, because the school says, well, we sent it, and the servicer says, we can't do anything until we hear from the school. And yeah, hopefully that's not the boat you're in. It could be nothing. But I would, if it's been that long, I would recommend contacting your financial aid or your registrar's office and talking to them. But it'd be good to know if your peers are in the same boat or if it's a personal issue. And one of the last questions, for the annual service offering, is it 75 per an individual, or is it 75 per quarter for an individual? Why is that different? So the reason, first of all, it's if you're individual, it's 75 per quarter. Do the math on that. That's $300 for the year versus 419 for a consultation. So what we did is we took the price of a consult and we discounted it way down, broke it up into quarterly payments specifically to make it budget friendly for residents. We designed that product for medical residents, but we also give you unlimited access to your advisor throughout the year. Whatever you need comes up, we're here for you. Phone call, email, Zoom, whatever you need. The reason we charge more for couples, and it's only for couples who both have debt. If you're married and your spouse doesn't have debt or not enough to worry about, you pay the individual fee. Couples consults are extremely complex. Usually we're running 3 calculators, one for you, one for them, and one showing the combined debt. Because when you start breaking out incomes, or I'm in training this long, they're in training, they're not in training, it gets extremely hairy. And so we just have to charge more for the time. Those calls can sometimes take 2 hours. And the annual service from our couples take up a lot more time on the annual service, and that's fine. We know that, but that's just the nature of things, right? And which servicer do you recommend with consolidating? I don't have an answer to that anymore. I used to recommend Mohila. We were excited when Mohila took over the loan forgiveness contract, and they just got overwhelmed. And don't get me started on the reasons. It's not all their fault. The government is partly at fault for how they've handled things the last few years with COVID and extensions, and yeah, it's just a mess right now. All the servicers are understaffed, stressed out, lawsuits flying all over the place, last minute notifications from Department of Ed, and it's just a mess. Okay. And so, you catch more flies with honey. whatever servicer you go with. If there's a problem on your account or you need to call in for a question or support, be as nice to these people as you can. Whatever's going on in your account, it's probably not that person's fault on the other end of the phone. Okay. At the same time, they need to give you correct information, which they may or may not be able to do. So yeah, it's a tough thing right now. Does the private loan through medical school impact credit? Your credit rating? Yes, all of your student loans can impact your credit rating. You're generally not dinged for having a lot of student loan debt. It's just part of life these days in America, as long as your loans are in a proper repayment or forbearance status and everything looks good on the account. Private debt is just it's like anything else, just like credit card debt or a home equity loan or whatever. As long as the debt to income ratio is something they look at, which it could impact your credit score. But generally speaking, as long as the loan is in good standing and you're in a approved forbearance or repayment plan and you're not behind on your payments, it shouldn't be a problem. If you got private loans, it might be worth taking a look at refinancing those depending on how much you have or when you took them out. If you took them out for medical school, they probably got a residency deferment period. If you took them out before medical school, they're probably coming due here soon. You need to look into what your options are there with those. So our couples 120 per quarter for the annual service? Yes, they are. So 480 per year for couples. Is Mohila also going to stop servicing PSLF? They are, and they have. They stopped that. It was either March 1st or April. It was April 1st, or no, May and June. There's no PSLF servicing happening because there's a transition. The Department of Education decided to bring it all in-house. That may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing. Time will tell. And then I believe they're going to start, they weren't clear whether they're going to start processing again July 1st or end of July, but July is when they will start processing again. So even if your servicer is Mohila or Nelnet or Ed Financial, if you start sending out in PSLF forms, we recommend doing that basically once a year. And then anytime you leave a job is a good time to do it again. This Department of Education is going to handle just the PSLF portion, but you've still got your servicer there too. This is a whole new dynamic. We've never seen anything like this. We're honestly not sure what to expect from this. All right. So yeah, that's what's going on. So again, it's important that you stay clear who does what, logins, account views, where to find what piece of information and activity. It's important that you keep up on that. There's a big transition right now going on. It's meant to be a good thing. All right. They're trying to make it easier for you as a borrower to go mainly to studentaid.gov to handle most of your business. So we'll see how that goes.
All right. So the two questions in the chat, one of them you did answer. The other is if I want to start payments under the SAVE plan and my loans are currently in the grace period, what would be my first step?
All right. If you want to get on save sooner than later, you would have to do a consolidation at this time or whenever your loans come out of in-school deferment, which if they're technically in grace, that means they're out of in-school deferment. Otherwise, you won't technically, even if you apply for save tomorrow, they're just going to sit on that application and they're not going to formally put you in save to get qualified payments until the end of that 6-month grace. So you would need to consolidate if you want to start making save payments sooner. We never know the timeline from one graduating year to the next, but generally speaking, you're looking at 4 to 6 weeks for them to process everything and you get that letter saying you're on the new plan. Usually your payments due 15, 20 days later. So typically we see your first payment, even if it's zero, your first payment is due when you start getting credit either late June or around August 1st if you do this stuff during June. Yeah, great question. There was one more question. Okay. So that's the same question there. All right. So I think we're good.
All right. Great.
All right.
Well,
A few more keep popping up. Do we want to stay on, Jason, or do we
yeah,
want
let's call these the last two and then we'll wrap up with everything and appreciate everyone's time here. But these have been great questions. So let's
Gotcha.
knock
They're good questions. Let me just take a moment and say thanks for the questions. I love this is the part that I love about doing these sessions. I really do. And I see we've still got the majority of our audience still sticking around. So I appreciate, I hope everyone's enjoying these questions as well. When we leave a job, do we ask our employer if we're leaving to fill out well, it's TEPSLF or just regular PSLF? Most of you wouldn't be doing what they call temporary expanded. So yes, here's the deal with PSLF. You technically apply for it on the back end. You don't have to do anything over the next 10 years, but that's just asking for trouble. What we recommend to our clients is once a year, usually the same time you're doing your annual recertification for your income driven payment plans. That's also a good time to fill out a PSLF form. That way you get a letter saying, hey, here's your official credit. So you've made 12 payments up to this date. You keep doing that every year. And that way, when you hit that 10-year mark, there's no nasty surprises at the end, right? You know, you're good. You've got all your credit and you're just counting the last few payments. But yes, anytime you leave an employer, it's a really good idea to have them do a final certification showing your official dates from that employment. And that way, when you get that final letter back from Department of Education, you've got that letter saying, hey, you worked here 4.5 years, you've got this many payments, you file that. Hopefully, you've all got a student loan file on your computer, or better yet, the cloud. If you don't, make one now, save all that stuff. Don't count on your servicer to save it. They'll lose it, and then you got a problem. Save all of your student loan documentation, especially your PSLF certification letters. But yes, you do that every time you leave a job. Great question. When consolidating, should I put my loans, my residency as my current employer? Yes. And when can you see if loans are in grace after graduating? So it looks a little bit different on each servicer, but log into your servicer website and you should see like the loan details. Click on the loan details, and within each loan, you should see the payment status or the status of that loan, whether it says in school, deferment, grace period, post enrollment, repayment. What gets really annoying is when it simply says deferment. And you're like, is that in school deferment? Is that post enrollment deferment? What? Yeah, that can be a little confusing sometimes, but your unsubsidized loans should say grace period, but your grad plus loans have a post enrollment deferment. And so sometimes it doesn't give you that whole post enrollment, and you're like, what kind of deferment? Let your unsubsidized loans guide you. If you see all those have flipped to grace period or graduated or repayment, something other than in school, you should be good to go. All right. I think that's it.
We did it. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for a master class, really, in all things student loans. I learn new stuff every time we talk as well. I think this was really great for our team and our audience here, and certainly the graduated doctors who are now entering residency. It's June 9th, so we're aiming towards July 1st, so we're just about there. Thank you to everyone for coming and enjoying the series. A big thank you also to Sarah Nathan, our marketing communications coordinator, and Brooke Moore, our director of strategic partnerships at Thalamus, for doing hosting stuff, Q&A stuff, all of the work that needs to happen on the back end. This is a really great 4-part series. To all of you that joined us, we really appreciate you coming. As I mentioned before, we will be sending out a survey this week, so we want to hear your feedback, what you loved, what could be better, what we should do for next year to help students coming behind you as well. And we will also announce who wins the reimbursement of their residency application fees, and we'll be in touch with the winner for that as well. And there will be more following up to everyone who enjoyed the series in an email, which our team will send out this week. So, Brandon, any closing words here as we kind of wrap up?
I was just about to say, if you found this beneficial when you get to training, if you find some of your fellow trainees need anything, we do free resident didactic sessions. We don't charge anything. We don't care if your program's 10 or 100. Just have the chief or whoever reach out to me at the email on the screen, and we'll be happy to set up a time and speak to your group via Zoom. We enjoy doing those. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon, and thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this first year of this webinar series. Looking forward to do it again in the future. Hope everyone has a great night, and more will follow up from us soon. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Thanks.